Hey guys, what's up? So it's been a while. I've been busy. I have a job of my own, have things that I gotta do. Plus, I don't like to bother you guys with a lot of updates and a lot of, not updates, but a lot of videos that are just basically to create content and fill crap in the channel, fill the channel up with crap. And I really don't like to do that because, I'm not here to really make a living out of YouTube. I'm just here to help out. But I do have question. I do get questions from you guys every now and then, and whenever I get a question, I try to make time to answer it and help you guys out. Okay, so I had a question not too long ago about handling a checkbox from Material UI, but not just a checkbox. Okay, a multitude of checkboxes, like several checkboxes at the same time. So what we're going to do, instead of having a project built from Visual Studio like I normally do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do it on the Code Sandbox, which is actually a pretty cool toolbox, online toolbox that I would recommend everyone to that is learning and getting their hands wet and developing, to get used to it and kind of mess around with it a little bit, because this is a great way to test your code, build small portions of code, like small chunks of code, and test it out and see how it works, and without having to actually pollute your own application with unnecessary fixes and codes that you're gonna have to control Z all the way back. So this one basically, it's like a playground that you get to mess around with it and do whatever you want. And then once you get it working, then all you have to do is just basically grab that code and copy and paste it and put it in your site, in your application, and then it's kind of guaranteed to work, right? Also, if you go into Stack Overflow and things like that, a lot of times it's always a good idea to provide a piece of the code, and also provide a sandbox like this, so that if anyone wants to help you out, they can come over here and adjust it. The bad thing that I gotta tell you about this is that unless you make it private, if it's public, anyone can come in here and just change your stuff. So careful with that, okay? Make sure that you don't share anything that is very sensitive, that has sensitive information for your job or your clients or whatever. But at the same time, also don't, just keep it private, okay? But just everything that you do up here, make sure that it's fake information. Okay, so that's the explanation of what we're doing. Before we go forward, if you still have any questions, put the questions down in the comments, and I'll try my best to make time, to get to it. I am not your tutor, okay? I can't get to your stuff like right away, okay? So if you ask me a question about something in your project or whatever, I may not have the time to get to it before you get to it, or before you find help somewhere else. So that this probably isn't the right venue for that, okay? But if you just want to learn something generally and you have some time to wait, then ask me a question and I'll try my best to answer it, okay? This is not a challenge, so don't ask me something that you just want to be like, okay, let me see if he really knows. So I'm going to challenge him with this super hard question. Now, I'm not asking you to challenge me. I'm asking you to legitimately ask me a question of something that you want to know, and I'll try my best to answer it. Okay? All right. So do that. Ask me questions. And also, if you want to subscribe to my channel, get notifications, by all means, go ahead. If not, it's all good. All right, so that's enough, and let's go ahead into this. So let's figure out first what is going to be the requirements of this project. Okay, so I have already one that I already set up so that you can see what we're going for. Okay, so we have 3 groups here of checkboxes, right? And this button here, which is just there, just to be there. Don't worry about this button. I probably won't even add it to the one where we're going to build. But this is set up here, and don't worry about the look and feel. This is ugly, but we're not trying to design anything, right? And the idea is that I want to be able to select any movies right, of any genre that I want. So I want to watch some action, romance, horror movie. That's something crazy. And I wanted to be movies, not serious. So I'll check movies, right? And I wanted to be original for Netflix, right? So I check on that, and then once I hit show results, then I should be able to get a data back from whatever API I'm trying to hit with these parameters, okay? This is not connected to any API, so I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I can use Material UI to check individual checkboxes this way and toggle the state for each one individually. But at the same time, I want to make sure that if I want to select all of them, like for example here, I don't want to go and click one at a time like this. This will take forever, okay? So instead of that, I just hit select all, and I am automatically selecting all of them. Likewise, I can deselect all of them, and then the toggle moves over to the deselect all again, and all of them are deselected. But also at the same time, I want to make sure that if I do select them all individually, that it automatically understands that I selected them all, and then this goes all to deselect. And then as soon as I deselect one of them, it understands that not all of them are selected, so it deselects all of them. It deselects all at the same time, or whatever, it deselects all. So hopefully that makes any sense, okay? This is pretty good functionality for user experience, okay? So we're not looking at design here. This is ugly, obviously, and we're not looking at actually hard development we're not trying to get a promise from an API with this either. This is just basically UI development, and that's it. All right, so with that aside, I'm gonna put that aside. Okay, I only created that so that I can have some kind of project, some goal that we're going to reach. All right, so how do we start up with this sandbox thing? So first thing you're gonna do is you go to the code sandbox. It's right here, codesandbox.io. Okay, and first thing you're gonna do is create an account. Okay, so I think if you try to log in directly by using your GitHub account or your Apple account or your Google account or something like that, you can do that as well, and that way you don't have to actually manually create an account. I did it with my GitHub account, so there's that. But whatever you want, okay? So once you're logged in, I want you to hit on this create sandbox here so that you start creating your platform. So in my case, I am going to go ahead and create my sandbox, and it's going to give me here a bunch of templates of sandboxes that you can use. So if you're going to work with vanilla JavaScript, you can create this one right here, and it will load nothing but just the latest version of no, it doesn't even load Node, I believe. I don't remember. But yes, if you're going to do Angular, it will download its own, the most current version of Angular. Same thing for React or Vue. If it's Node, it's going to create a node, all of that. So if it's React TypeScript, so make sure that if we're gonna work with React, by the way, but make sure that if you're gonna do React, that you don't check React TypeScript, because this is going to create a different kind of React. The same React, it's the same React, but instead of using JavaScript, it's going to use TypeScript, which is fine. It's great. It's actually really good, but that will require you to know TypeScript, and we're not going to go over TypeScript right now. So let's just go ahead and create a React sandbox, okay? So I'm going to click on React sandbox, and it's going to go through its thing until it creates this. Let me close this here. Okay, so now you see that it's already created a new sandbox, and it has, if you look here in the dependencies, it's going to have React and React DOM and React scripts, which are necessary resources for React to work. Okay, so we're going to load up Material UI. Now, the thing with Material UI is that you need a few things to load up for Material UI to work. So there are ways that you can do this. You can go ahead and just manually here go into the dependency and add the dependency that you need for Material UI, which is at MUI/material. However, you would have to know exactly all of the dependencies the Material UI needs, and not a lot of people know this. Not a lot of people know exactly which are, and there are I think 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there are 4 types of dependencies that you're gonna need for Material UI. Not a lot of people know them. Okay, so my suggestion is when you don't know which exact libraries you're gonna need to upload here, or dependencies, libraries, dependencies, frameworks, whatever you want to call them. So if you don't know them, then just leave this alone and let this code sandbox itself load whatever dependencies it will require. It will do it in a very smart way. As soon as you start adding stuff up here in the import, it will understand that you're trying to import something that you don't have, and it will try and suggest it to you right here and tells you, hey, you're trying to download Material UI, but it's not available. Would you like to download it? So that's pretty good. I like that. All right, so let's go ahead and go through these files here a little bit. So we have some public here, which is basically just your index file, which is this that you're seeing right here. So you're not gonna ever do anything in there unless you want to do some kind of link resource to I don't know, so some kind of like JavaScript, or not JavaScript, to font awesome or something like that. So I barely never even touch this public folder, because this is not really, whatever you do here is never really for nothing you're ever gonna keep. So it doesn't really matter. It doesn't even make sense to develop it nicely, okay, or design it even. So that's why I don't ever do anything there. But it's needed. Code Sandbox needs it, because otherwise it can't run in a mini browser that it has here, right? This is its own little browser. All right. I guess I should have explained this UI a little bit, this console here, but do I really need to? I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? All right. And then you're gonna have the source folder, which is, and then the package JSON. So this right here represents, this little tree, source tree right here, represents a lot like what an actual development environment will look like, okay? Your development environment that you're working on in React will have a public folder, and will have an SRC folder, and will have a package JSON, and then more stuff. But so this here tries to mimic it, okay, in a way smaller scale. We're gonna work in this source folder, because that's where all the code usually goes in React. So we have an app JS, which is your main one right here. It says hello code sandbox, blah blah blah, all that stuff, right? So what we're going to do, so we're gonna actually, inside the source folder, we're gonna create, let's see, new file here. We're gonna create a new file, and we're gonna create a file for the filter. We're gonna call it filter, right? Which is going to be what is going to generate this section. This let me bring it back up. It's going to create this big section that you see here. Each one of these sections is a filter module. So we can call it filter module, whatever you want to call it. Now I clicked off of it a little too soon. I need to put a JS in there. Okay, so it's a JavaScript object or file, JavaScript file. And we're gonna call it filter, or filter module, whatever you want to call it. And now to make it, to make the filter module start building stuff, what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to import, because we're going to be working with React. We're gonna import React, and we're going to also import the use state, because we're going, pretty much every time you work with React, you have some kind of state you're going to be dealing with. Otherwise, there isn't even a need to create a JavaScript file. Just add whatever it is that you're trying to do somewhere. If I try to make a JavaScript file as a component, it's because I want to make sure that I handle the states for that particular component individually in that state file itself. That's what makes it a reusable and functional component. Otherwise, it's just a block of code that you put in somewhere else that you're gonna have to re-import. So that will make sense only if you have, for example, like a piece of code that you don't want to repeat all the time. So yeah, you could do that, but most of the time, reusable components have their own functionality built in, encapsulated in it. So, all right, so this is coming from React, right? So as you can see right now, you're gonna have some little squiggly things here where it's telling you, that something is wrong. But don't freak out, because what this really means is that it's React is defined, but it's never being used. I mean, that something on the bottom here has to actually use these imports that you're trying to import, right? These things, stuff that you're trying to import. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the main skeleton of my filter, right? And then that's going to be a function. So I'm going to call it const, and then I usually want to, or not usually, what you should always do is that you should always name your main app, your main file, name of the name of the main function that is going to be exported from your file, same as the name of the file that you're creating. So, and this is going to be a arrowhead function here, an arrow function, not arrowhead, an arrow function. Okay, they call it arrow function. They call it a fat arrow function. I don't know, something like that. So an arrow function. Okay, so this is basically the same thing as saying function filter this here. So this is the same thing. These two things are the exact same thing. Okay, so we have a function here, and then in this function, what we're going to do is we're going to basically just return an object. Return an object. Let me just give that a proper indentation, and then in that object we're going to just to make sure that it works, we're going to write filter one, filter, or just filter. Yeah, there you go. Alright, so now this alone like this will not work. You have to make sure that you export whatever it is that you're going to, that you created. Right now it only works inside here. It doesn't come out to the anywhere else because it's not exported. You have to, whatever you build something, think about it as a factory. Okay, so React is your factory, and this filter right here is the project, the product that the React factory created, or that you created inside your React factory. So now you have to export it to the world, and the world will be able to use it, right? So exporting products and things like that. So we're gonna export this as a default, and it's going to be the name of the component filter. So notice now that the squiggly line went away because it's being exported. React is being used. Everything is perfect. So we're gonna go ahead and save that. Okay, and you can see that the use state is still squiggly because we're not using any state yet, but we will. That's why I'm kind of putting it there on this, on the side. So now let's see if this worked. So we're gonna go to apps here, and then we're just going to delete this stuff here. But what we're going to do is we're going to import that filter that we just created. So we're gonna import the filter from filter, and then we're gonna come over here, and then we're gonna create that component, call that component right there, and there it is. So as you can see, the filter is working. So how do we know that this is real? We're gonna put a 2 there, and there's the 2 there. So we know that we are able to import filters now. Okay, the idea of doing this component here, this filter component, and not, instead of just adding it here, is because we want to make sure that we add a few components with each one with their own individual functionality. Okay, same functionality but individual functionality. Okay, so we're going to make sure that we can do this, that we can create as many components as we need, but each one will have its own data, its own functionality, its own behaviors, even if you wanted to, but at the same time you're not repeating all the code that we're going to have in here. You're not repeating it over and over and over. Instead, you just recall that component and give it the props that you want to give it to. it. We're gonna eventually do 3 of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to just delete that stuff here. We'll just keep it like that for now, and just Control S for saving, because it's always a good idea to save. All right. So now back to the apps. Yeah, let's do the app first, because this is where the data is going to be loaded in, right? So what we want to do here is we want to make sure that from the filter itself, but also from the app. So the app has the app file here is the one that is going to contain the data, okay? And then the filter is basically the one that is going to contain a lot of the design, but most of the props and everything that you're gonna pass up to the app folder file. Okay, this will make a little bit more sense eventually. So what we're going to do, so let's first of all, let's design this filter, okay? And this is where I was saying earlier at the beginning that if you wait until you actually start designing stuff and importing stuff, then you can have this thing kind of pick out what it is, what dependencies you actually will need. So I already have a list of a list of stuff here that I'm going to be using, so I'm not going to type it all in, but I'm going to talk about them, and I'm going to go ahead and copy them here. Just make sure you pause the video if you want to. All right, so this is what we want to look at. Okay, so let's just first of all look at this real quick. So I'm trying to import a grid, a typography, form group, form control, form label, form control label, blah 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 blah. So all of this stuff right here are components that exist in Material UI. Okay, right here in Material UI. Now, how do you know to do this right here? Is because I'm assuming that you're trying to do something, you're trying to work on something from your website, from your app, right? So in your app, you should have this already that you were trying to import. But if you don't know exactly where to import this stuff from, then I'm assuming that then you are at least working with Material UI right here, and they will be the one to tell you what it is that you need to upload. So for example, let's say you're in the app control, right here it will tell you import form control, or in this case, this is the way I like to do it. I like to do it where I just import MUI material, and then inside this parenthesis I can concatenate as many controls as I want to upload or import. So this is how you get that information here. But you can get it from here if you're working directly from Material UI, or you can just copy it from your application and put it up here, and it's all the same. Okay, I am also, go back to the beginning. I am also importing make styles from input styles. Now, we're not really going to be styling what we're doing here. We're not going to be styling it, but I still want you to understand how this works. So that's why I'm putting it here, and we will add a few styles just so at least we can understand what's going on in the screen. But we're not going to give it color, and we're not going to worry about that stuff. All right. So now that I've done this, you notice here that the dependency is not found, and then it's suggesting that you add this dependency. This is the beauty about this particular toolbox here that I like. So I'm gonna click yes, and then it's going to add Material UI. As you can see, it's being added in here, and it's gonna do this own thinking thing. And just give it a minute. Okay, so it found that, but it's also realizing that you need the styled emotion style dependency. So I'm gonna click yes. And by the way, this will also work if you in Angular or Vue.js and things like that. It will just still find dependencies that you need. It's also suggesting that you add this one, and there should be 1/4 one. Actually, I think that was probably it. Oh no, yeah, the MUI styles of dependency, and that's it. That's all 4 of them. So like I said at the beginning, actually, I was talking about this, is that you will need these 4 different dependencies for React to work. But unless you are so experienced with Material UI that you know exactly which dependencies you will need to upload, and also you will need to know which versions are the latest versions, is almost impossible to keep track with all that. So I'll just do it this way and let this thing kind of suggest what it is that I need. Okay, all right, so I have my stuff there, and I'm going to go ahead and put in the styles that I'm going to need, only because we're not really going to spend time styling it, but I want you to have it anyway. So I'm going to make some space here, and I'm going to copy and paste this. So there are just a few styles that I want to create, a few classes. One class is for my field set, another one for the form group, another one for the section selection heading, and for the switch control. And it's basically, if you notice, it's just basically just margins and paddings and things like that. There's no, I mean, I guess there's a color here because I do want to be able to see the difference between things, so it's kind of legible. but I'm not really putting a whole lot of thought into this design here. Okay, that's just it's as basic as I can possibly get it while still making it understandable on the screen. Okay, so go ahead and take it, pause it if you have to, and look at this stuff and copy and paste it and do whatever you gotta do. Okay. All right, so now that I have that, I'm going to make sure that I start creating my actual filter, HTML. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I am going to create a form control, okay, for my field set. So I am going to, on my return here, I'm gonna create this return. I'm gonna put a parenthesis, or not a parenthesis, but whatever you call this. Yeah, parenthesis. It's called parenthesis. Like that. Now this B right here will actually be a form control. And there it is right there. You notice how it's already, the IntelliSense is already telling me that it's already been imported. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to use, then yes, go ahead and put that there. Obviously it has to close. There you go. It has to close in itself. So form control is added. All right, so now for my form control, and I'm not gonna go in depth with all of these components because we will be here forever. Okay, so if you want to know what kind of props and what kind of different settings you can add to form control, you're more than welcome to come here. For example, look at that, I already have form control, and you can come over here and see which kind of props you can add to form control. Like in this case, component, like which component you want to generate with your form controls, things like that. So okay, but I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. So in my case, I am going to create field sets for my form control. So my component is going to be a field set. All right, and I'm gonna give it a class name because the class name that I'm using already up here, right? I'm gonna give it a class name, and then my class names is going to be an object that is going to be calling classes that field set classes. Now I have to create this object right here, so I am going to come here to underneath my filter, not my filter, but my main object here, my main function, and I'm going to make an object called classes, not an object but a variable called classes, so I can use it. And the classes is going to create an instance of the useStyles function that I created above. So what this does basically is this classes right here uses this entire function right here, right? So by classes, I'm getting access to this entire block, and by not concatenated, but by giving it classes that field set, I am destructing in here which specific object inside my function I want to target. In this case, it's going to be this one right here. So all of these functions, CSS properties, are going to be imported inside this element. Okay. Now everything is still broken because there's nothing inside it yet, right? All right. So inside my form controller, I am going to create my form group. What is going on? This should have finished, not finished, but it should have, I see what I did. I didn't actually close it. All right, now it's actually working. All right, so I'm gonna get my form group right there and just click on it. It should have closed by itself. There you go. Alright, so my form group is also going to call this class right here. So just I'm going to copy this right here and put it inside my form group, and that's going to call the form group right there. It's already highlighted. Alright, and now I am going to create two items inside there. I'm going to create a form label, All right, and I wish this thing did, close itself. But besides my form label, I am going to also create this. The form label is going to be what is on top of the field set, just a name that in my case is going to be genre, and the other one is going to be whatever it was called. I forgot now, but it's the heading of each section where all of the group of checkboxes, right? So, and that form group is going to have that form label, and then underneath the form label I'm going to add a grid, and this inside here is where the checkboxes are going to go. So these are the checkboxes, and then this is going to be the label for each checkboxes. So basically you can see now on the UI that it's already going to start looking like 3 groups of label with a bunch of checkboxes in it. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the label first. Okay, so the label is going to have, I'm just going to actually copy this from my code here, and then I'll just go over it. Okay, all right, so and just delete this for now so it doesn't fail on me. And I'm going to this right here, and I'm going to just name it label also for now so it doesn't break. All right, cool. So what I'm doing here, basically, just give this a minute to, there you go. So what I'm doing here basically is on my form group, make sure that I have, there we go, right here. I like things to be, properly spaced and stuff. All right, so my form group is gonna use a component called field set. Okay, so don't worry about that. That's just a component that I set up in, myself. You actually don't even need that. So, I guess you do. All right, I'll put it back. All right, here you go. And then now I'm setting up a grid in here. So the grid is basically, if you're used to Material UI, then you already know what this is. But if you're not used to Material UI and you're used to something like Bootstrap, for example, this grid right here is kind of like a flex grid. So it's a way that you can create rows and columns and things like that. So for the grid, the first thing you need, and this is a component that is native to Material UI, so you can go to Material UI and check it out. So for my grid component, I have a property of container, which is going to contain, the width and all that stuff, and the direction in which is going to be, and then the spacing, and then aligning it to center. Okay, so this right here will be each spacing is about 8 units, so that's 24 pixels right there. Then each container should have a bunch of items in it that you want to align, right? So my first aligned item in it is going to be a text, which is called typography in Material UI, and that's basically going to contain just a label, which is this yellow thing right here. Okay, and it's got a class called selection heading, which is this, and this is why it's yellow, because of this right here. All right, now underneath of that, or I shouldn't say underneath, but next to it, and the reason why it's showing next to it, not underneath it, is because I created a direction row here. If I were going to do this, for example, it will put it underneath the label, but I want it to be next to it, so I put row here, and then the spacing, which is the difference, this space that you see there. Okay, all right, so now on the next to it, I have this stack right here, which is also, you can get this from Material UI, and this stack will basically consist of a this text, deselect all, a switch, which right now it doesn't do anything, it toggles by CSS only, but it doesn't really have any properties yet. Okay, it's not doing anything at all. And size small, because I want it to be kind of small. The original one is really big, I don't like it. And then a select all on the other side of it. Okay, so nothing to it, that's just regular HTML basically. Okay, all right, so now I'm going to set up my checkboxes. So I am going to go to my grid right here, and I'm going to make sure that my grid, let me just go ahead and minimize this so I can get it out of my way and work on my grid boxes right here. All right, so my grid is going to be a container, And then inside of my grid, actually, you know what? I should probably just do the same thing I did with the label. And then just put it in here like so. Okay, I'm just gonna get rid of some of the stuff here so that you don't get confused, because we will eventually add this as well. Okay, so this is going to be a name for now, and this is going to be a value, and we're going to get rid of this for right now, and then here we're just going to make it a checkbox, just a label for the checkbox. It should just be right next to it. See right there, checkbox. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this, tidy it up a little bit so you can understand it. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm creating a model of what the checkbox will look like. Okay, so I'm going to need the grid, because what this is going to do eventually is I am going to have more than one, right? So let's say I had two of them. So if I copy this right here and I put it underneath, then now I'm gonna have two checkboxes, right? And each one of them is utilizing this size constraints for that particular size of the screen. So in this case, because it's a medium-sized screen, it's dividing the space into 3 columns. So if I were going to add 2 more of these, you will see that it would allow me to add 1 more to make that 3rd column, and then if I add another one, it's going to add it right underneath it, because it's only using these 3 columns right here. Okay, now if you notice one thing here is that I have a lot of what is called what is it, do not repeat yourself, dry, a lot of dry code. Okay, so dry code is a term in web development that stands for do not repeat yourself. Okay, don't repeat yourself. So by don't repeat yourself, I mean this right here, this could be a component in itself. Okay, now some of the people that I followed online on YouTube and some of the people that I learned with would actually make this entire checkbox group its own file, right, called filter group maybe, and then each one of these granularly will be a filter in itself. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that is a great way to do it, to be honest, and in fact you probably should do it that way too, so that way you break down your components in smaller chunks. Okay, but every time you do that, every time you break down, let's say for example this entire thing is a component, which is what we're doing right now, and then each individual checkbox is also its own component. Every time you do that, then you kind of have to carry props from the smaller child to the parent to the grandparent, and then just carry the props up and down just like that, right? So that they all be communicating with each other, unless you make use of different technologies, Redux for example, where you have like a central base of properties and states that you can manage throughout anywhere in the application without having to navigate the props up and down, right? But we're going down a rabbit hole, so for the sake of keeping this as simple as possible, let's not break this down too much. Remember, this is supposed to be a testing ground anyway. All right, so but yet this is still not ideal. This is still not the way you want to create all these checkboxes, individually. Also for many reasons, because if one reason is obviously this is way too much repeating, and another reason is because if you look at my my code here, you notice that not every group is going to have the same amount of checkboxes. So if I did it this way, if I hard coded each group like this, then I will have to then make sure that that each group, like right now for example, this group, all of the group will have 4, because I created 4 checkboxes, 1, 2, 3, 4. So all of the groups will have 4 checkboxes. That's not gonna work for me, right? Some are gonna have 2, some are gonna have 4, some are gonna have 12. So it won't work. So how do we actually set this up so that ends up being a little bit more functional for you? Well, first of all, is you gotta create a prop called data, okay? And that data is going to be your control that you're going to set up here at the app level, and then from here, this filter will generate as many checkboxes as the data is going to allow in here. So this will make a little bit more sense once we actually figure it out. So for right now, let's go ahead and delete all of these, and then just leave one, because right now what I'm after right here is just basically creating the skeleton of the design, and this is it. This is about as skeleton as it's going to be. All right, so now that that's done, now we can actually start creating pulling up how many checkboxes we're going to need, the name for each checkbox, and all that stuff. So let's go to the app level now, and then the app level is where we're going to be controlling each filter individually, right? So this filter here has to have some kind of data, this filter is going to have another kind of data, and this filter is going to use another data, right? So we got to have these data. Now these pieces of data, either they could be in here statically hard-coded into the code, which is not ideal. In a real application, it will come from an API string, but we don't have APIs. We're going to have them all here. So I'm going to hard code some here, and then you can go ahead and pause, pause or whatever, and type them up. Okay, so I have one. Basically, they're just arrays. Okay, nothing to it. Okay, so we have an array called genre, and another array called content type, and another array called program type. Now, every piece of this right here will make a difference on how the rest of the code is going to go from here on out. Okay, as this code will work, what we're doing here will work is if the array that you're picking up from your API looks like this. If the array that you're bringing up from the API looks like, let's just call this one 2, and then here we're gonna create objects instead, and then here we're gonna call we're gonna say ID 1 name. I'm gonna bring the acquired up here, and then I'm gonna just copy that here, and then this one's gonna be ID 2, and then this one's gonna be in here, and then just delete this. If your ID comes, your data looks like this, instead of just having an array of strings in it, if it looks like this, like it has an array of objects in it, then you have to modify your code a little bit on what we will do later, because and I will keep this one alive here, but without using it, just so I can show you what it will look like. Actually, this will actually be like that. Okay, just so what you will need to adjust. Okay, so I'm gonna keep that one there as another example, but we probably won't use it yet. For right now, we're just gonna build it this way, okay, by having just basically strings of an array of strings in it. Okay, so now that I have the actual information in there, now I know that I have data that I can use. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're gonna go back to the filter here, and now we're gonna start actually creating props to this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this right here, that it generates for as many objects as my data has in it. So in order to do that, I have to iterate my data. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a prop, and I'm going to call it data, and I'm going to go ahead and map through my data. This is not what I wanted. Let me just back that up again. Data that, would you stop doing that? Stop it. There we go, map. And then I'm gonna create a map function, okay? Map function is an array function that it basically picks up an array called data, right? So this will be the same thing as saying array, right? So this is going to prototype my data inside of my array, okay? So it's a prototype function. And inside here, I am going to create a function like so, okay? And that function is going to return something. All right, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create to each iteration that it finds inside the map, I'm going to give it a name. In this case, what did I do? Let me see. Let me just follow my own example so I know that I don't have to get lost there. Okay, so I just called it item. So technically this could be anything. It could be item. It could be your name. It's just a name. Okay, it's a placeholder. And then I'm gonna want to use this index as well. Okay, so I'm gonna pull up two things out of my map. For each map, for each iteration, I want to know, I want to have a placeholder for each item that it finds, and I want to give it an index for each item that it finds. So if the data has 3 objects in it, right, it's going to be, and the items are named Louis, John, and Peter. The items are going to be Louis, John, Peter, and the index are going to be 0, 1, and 2, because array indexes start with 0, right? All right, so now that I have that, I can now bring this grid right here and paste it inside there. And just make sure that I do my little cleanup here. I can clean that up as well. Clean that up. All right, so now what we're doing here is basically this is going to now return this object for as many data items as it finds. So as it goes through my data items, which are going to be these items, it's going to look for as many data. It's going to map through as many data items as it finds. Let's say it found 3, like I said, right? Like in this one right here, it's going to find 2. It's going to basically create 2 of these objects. So I'm going to end up with 2 checkboxes. But in order for that to happen, I had to make sure that this data right here exists somewhere. It could exist in here, like I could create it. I could create my data object. Let me minimize my styles here and this import as well. No, not yet. Actually, I'm not using the radio group. Let me just get rid of that. All right, and I'm not using class names either. I don't know. I guess this automatically just added itself to it, so ignore that. So anyway, I can add this data in here, right? Just like this, for example. Or where is it? Right here. Let's just pick this 2 right here, and then come over here and add my data, and it's gonna be called data. So there you go. So now I have a data object which is in here, and the data object has 2, right? So the data is not. It says the data is not defined. What? Oh wait, this is that. Had it in the wrong place. All right, so now it's inside my filter right here. So you notice that it created 2 checkboxes, right, for all of my containers, for all of the different containers that I have. So I'm calling this filter here 3 times, and it gave me 3 filters, which is good. And each filter did a map function through a data array, and it basically found that it has 2 items, and it gave me 2 checkboxes because it has 2 items. So if I were to add another one and I were to call it whatever, then now I have 3 items. Therefore, it gives me 3 options here in this map. It's returning 3 objects of this kind right here. Okay. Now in the name here, I can go ahead now and make sure that I have my item. And now it created the item. Where did I get that from? It's from here, right? So now that I have the item, it gave me the actual item as my label, right, for each one of these items in here. Okay, but we are still far from where we need to be, because the problem persists where I still have 3 objects for every component, which is not very useful because some of the components are going to have less checkboxes, less options, and some components are going to have more options. So you need to make this a little bit more versatile, and this is why my data doesn't exist here. This is why I am controlling my data from in here instead, okay? But how can I make this talk to each other? Well, this is where props come to play. So this right here, I gotta turn this data into a prop, and I do that by going to my filter right here and destructuring, do a destructure, and then just put a data prop in there. By doing so, I am making sure that this data flies out as a prop out of this component, and then I can catch it somewhere else. So right now it's not defined, okay? And the reason it's not defined is because I'm not really catching it anywhere else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my app right here. Oh, make sure I save this. I mean, I think it saves by itself anyway. So I'm gonna go to my app here, and I'm going to come over here and actually start calling this prop that I just created, okay? So I created that prop and I called it data. Now this prop is going to be using this genre right here. And I'm going to do the same thing for the rest, but I'm going to change the name to content type and program type. So as you can see now, each filter now has programmatically, as it's iterating for as many items as it finds in this particular data right here, in this genre. So this one right here is using all of these right here and creating that many checkboxes. And this one right here is creating the content type, which is 4 of them right here, and it's creating that many checkboxes. So now this is a little bit more useful because now you don't have extra checkboxes, but you're also not manually repeating yourself for how many of this you will need, okay? So this is good. All right, so we're getting somewhere. So now that we have basically the entire, so we did this in 2 sections, right? We not 2 sections, but we satisfy some checkpoints here. The first checkpoint was to make sure that we have the HTML set up, and we did that. Then the next checkpoint was to make sure that we are populating our control here, our components, from the API so that we know, you know, the data and things like that. So now that we have that stuff, now it's time to actually get, you know, make it do something, okay? This is the programmatic or the programming part of it. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make sure that we can do this that we're doing right here, okay? Now you may think, okay, but I'm already doing this. I'm already checking my checkboxes and picking up, you know, like this is what I wanted to do to begin with. Well, yes, it's doing a native behavior that the checkbox does from just regular HTML5, but it's not really capturing any type of prop and not really doing anything helpful for you, all right? All you're seeing here is the way that a checkbox normally behaves, okay? So this will not really work. If I do the select all, none of that work. However, the toggle does switch, right? The reason why is because that is what a toggle does, okay? So what you're seeing right now is not really providing any data to you or to anyone. It's just doing what these HTML5 elements would do normally, okay? So we need to make them actually, we need to make these behaviors actually provide something, right? Actually do things. So now is when we need to go to work with some classes here, with some, you know, functions, sorry, some functions. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna work on these, each one of these boxes here, each one of these select checkboxes right here, right? So how do you do this stuff in React is by basically creating a by basically creating a state, right? And what a state does really is it captures an initial behavior or initial data, for example, and then with a state setter, you can set this data to mutate into something else. You have to understand also that states are not, you're not really changing the state, you're mutating the state. That's a whole different conversation for another day. But just know that you need to work with states in order to be able to mutate what it is that you're trying to do from within your application so that you can control it. Okay, so this is why we have this use state right here. So we're gonna need one first, and it's going to be, we're gonna call it the check state. So let's start with const, and the check state is gonna have an array of 2 items in it. One is gonna be the name of it, which is going to be checked state, okay? And the other one is gonna be the setter, and it's gonna be set checked state, okay? Usually is good naming convention to have whatever you name it and then put set in front of it and then camel case it, okay? And then that's going to equal use state, and then inside the use state we'll just leave it like this for now, okay? We'll have more to do here, but we're gonna leave it like that for now. So that's just the regular state. Now for in this guy right here, we have to create something for it. So what we're going to do here is we're gonna come to the checkbox itself, and the value right here we're gonna add, I mean not the value, but in the the value we're gonna actually do give it a value. So we're gonna create this value here, and we're going to give it the value of item. So now the value for the series here will be series, the value for movies will be movies, and so forth. And we're gonna do that with name as well, because in many forms you will need the name. So it's just good practice to do it anyway, because you may need it. In this particular case that we're working on here, we're not gonna need it, but it's just good practice to just automatically do it, okay? Because if you actually are doing post requests, for example, you're sending some information from here into a database, it's going to be needing this. So might as well just do it automatically. All right, so where were we? So we have to create a checked function. So the check, not function, property. The check property is what makes these checkboxes either checked or unchecked by a true or false. It's a Boolean property. Now the Boolean, if I come over here and I put if I put true to the checked, in this case it would just be checked like that. If I do checked, give it a second, it should have checked all of them. Does it need to be let me see. Normally in a regular input field this will work. Because this is a material control, it may work a little bit differently. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just actually attach the state, okay, which is checked state, and we're going to make sure that we make the check state true just to test it. There we go. So you can see now that we just made sure that all of them are now, they actually have a check status. So this status right here, this state right here is actually now working. Okay, this is not what you're looking at right now, is what you want to use to control which one are you going to pick and which one you're not going to pick in order to do stuff with it. So if I go back now and put false on this, then they go unchecked. So now I'm able to control the checked property of each of all these checkboxes by the state. So that's good, okay? But we're gonna eventually use it as something else. So let's just get rid of that for now, because I don't want to pass anything into it, okay? So let's go ahead and save that so that it can cascade down here. but we want to do something every time we click on it. Every time we click on it, we have to do something. So for what, in order to do that, you have to create a click event. For checkboxes, it's not click, it's actually on change. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an on change event, and then inside it we're going to create a function, and we're going to call it handle on change. All right, it's just actually we could possibly just create, oh wait a minute, I just made a boo-boo. And made a boo-boo. This needs to be an object. All right, so now I have this handle on change. It's telling me that it doesn't exist, so don't freak out. So I have to actually make this a function in the code. So I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna create a const, and I'm gonna call it handle on change, and then I'm going to basically in there I'm going to create a console log, and I'm gonna call it hey. All right, and I'm gonna bring my console down here so I can see it right there. So I'm gonna name that, and now if I click on any of these checkboxes, I should see down here a message basically that it's going to console log a hey. So as I click on it, hey. If I click it again, I see the number 2 next to it, hey. So every time I click on it, every time I click on any of them, it's gonna continuously give me a hey, hey, hey. So what I'm trying to prove here, same thing even if I click it off, what I'm trying to prove here is that can I just not show this stuff? I don't want to see the problems. Anyway, so what I'm trying to prove here is that my click event is working. Okay, so I have my click event and I have my state controlling the checked application. Okay, so now let's see now if if I am able to change the state of each one of these checkboxes by the actual click event. So I know I have my check state right here, which is, you know, basically right now I'm just gonna make it false, right? So let's see if I can make it all true. So I'm going to get my setter right here, and I'm going to set my setter to true. So what this is going to do is that every time that I click, every time this handle on change function fires up, which is going to be by this click event, by this on change event, right? So every time I click basically on any one of these right here, it will set my check state from false. It's gonna set it to true. It's gonna set it to whatever I put in here, and it's still gonna give me the console log anyway. Okay, so if I do it, if I click on it, bam, there you go. It made them all true. Now, the reason why it's doing them all in true is because all I'm doing is basically just doing this or doing this. Oops, that's not anything. Or doing that. That's basically all I'm doing. I'm just basically just changing the state for all of them inside it. All right, so that's the only reason why it's doing that, but that just simply won't work, right? I want to make sure that I do it one at a time. Now it is pretty cool to see that it is already defining the functionality to just this control and not all of them. Okay, that's the beauty of having these components broken down like this. Okay, so that's already good, but that's still not good enough, because we don't want that when we check one that we checked all of them to true. Okay, notice they don't even toggle. Okay, they just set to true, because this is what we did here, right? We could have it so that it's doing some you know, the inverse of whatever the check state is, and then it basically just toggles them, right? So now we can toggle it. But whatever, that was just to check that we have access to the click event and that we can do things with the click event. So what we're going to actually do here now is we're going to get a little bit further into this on click event, into this handle on change. Before we go any further, I know I did say that this index here needed to be used, right? Anytime you use a map function, the main item that you're iterating needs to have a key. So I'm going to key my components with my index. That way this key prop that you see down here goes away. All right, save that. That problem should be not a problem anymore. All right, it says that it's still another problem. I don't see why, but whatever. Program 2 is assigned right now. Oh yeah, that's because of this right here. I'm not using it. So let me just do this for right now. No problems. All right, cool. All right, let's go back to this. Let's get my console back up. Okay. That's still, because that's in the old console. All right, never mind. All right, so we're here now. So now what we're going to do is we're gonna redo this handle, not redo, but we're gonna modify this handle on change here so that it's a little bit, it's better for us to use, right? So just open up some space here. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create this is the pseudocode on it, right? This is what we need to do. How do we tell the code that I clicked on comedy, right? How is it gonna know that? How is it gonna know that comedy is what I need? Okay, well, you could tell the code, hey, if you find the checkbox named comedy, click it and do something to that checkbox only. Yes, that you could technically, but the bad thing about doing that is that you are assuming the name of the checkbox, which you will never know, because in this case it's comedy. In this object there is no comedy, so it won't do anything here. So now you're gonna have to do that functionality for each one of the checkboxes, which we will do. Actually, we will do that, but we'll do it in a better way, right? So you will need to know the name for each comedy, and on top of that, you will need to even know, you will need to know the name. You will need to know the perfect spelling of it. There is so much unknown there that you cannot do that. Plus the constant repeating. You will be repeating yourself so many times, and assuming that you even know how many items you have in any database. So it won't be very versatile. It will be very hard to maintain. And then in the future, if anything changes in the API, let's say for example Netflix got rid of sci-fi, now all of a sudden you have to find this function in your code and make sure they get rid of sci-fi. It's just not maintainable. So you have to make sure that you do it according to what it does. So a better solution for this is, the index for each of the arrays, right? You know that each array is indexed naturally, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. But you also can create what is called a position, okay? And the position is basically finding or creating a tag, a flag, so that you can create a position within the array. So an array has 5 items. Index 1 is also position 1, and index 2 is position 2, and like that. So I'm gonna create what is called basically just a position as my argument, because this is what I'm going to be handling. So I'm going to be cross-checking this right here against this index, and if they match, then that means that it knows that I'm clicking on that position. Then I can turn that position to on, to true, right? And not the other ones, just the ones that I am clicking on. So I'm creating an argument for this function, and then it's going to be a position. This argument is something that I'm going to pass to it later in my function right here, in my function callback. So what is it that I am going to be checking for in my position? I'm going to be checking for the index. Okay. All right. So now that we're doing that, now we actually need to create that logic. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a constant variable, and I'm going to call it updated check state, updated checked state. And then the updated check state, what it's going to do is going to go through my state, and then in my state is going to map everything that is inside, everything that it finds in it, We did that here. Okay, same idea. And then I'm going to give it obviously a name. It could be item, it could be whatever you want to call it. All right, and then that's also going to have this index, and it's going to be a function, and then I'm going to return something. All right, so we did that here. This is no different than what we did right here. A map with a return and a blah blah blah, and an item and an index, all of the anatomy of a map function. Okay, so what we're doing is we're iterating through the state, right? Which the state contains all the items that are inside it. So in this case, this state will contain this many items in it, right? So I am iterating through all of those, and in return, I am going to index. I'm going to find this index right here, and then for the index, I am going to equal the index. So if this is a comparison control, a comparison operator, not controller, operator. This, if the index equals 2, if it's equal to, this is the same, this is not equal, okay? Index equal, this is not the same thing as this, okay? This means that the position equals to the index. This means it's comparing if the position is equal to the index, if it's equal. So if the position, if the index equals to the position, and then I'm gonna put a ternary function here. All this does is do this, else do this, right? Do this, else do that. That's basically what it is. So what do I want to do? If it equals the position, I want to set it to negative, to false, and if not, set it to positive. Okay? So I'm just basically setting the item in it, or unsetting the item in it. Okay? And now in order to push this out, I want to set the check state to the updated check state in here. Alright, so now this right here just updated this check state with whatever information I find in here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and click save. Alright, now the one thing that you need to do here is you need to go to the check state right here, and you need to itemize this right here, because right now it's not going to find, it's going to find problems in it. Yeah, not yet, but it will. As soon as you start clicking on it, there you go. See, this right here already returned an item that it cannot be found. It can map it, and the reason why it can map it is because it's not an array. A map function is an array function, so you have to iterate this check state right here in order to do that. Right now it's just a boolean state. It needs to be an actual array. So what we're going to do for that to work is we're going to create a new array for our array of for our state array, right? But we're gonna do it in a little bit different. Instead of just putting, for example, an empty array in it, right, so that you can get rid of the error just like it did right now. It just makes everything positive. We're not gonna do it this way. We're gonna fill our state initially with a new array. This is a prototype basically, with a new array, and inside the array we're gonna pull up the data, the data object, right, times the length, that length, right? And then we're gonna use a fill function, which is also an array function, and we're gonna give it false. Now what are we doing here? So what we're doing here basically is we are creating a new array, right, for as many items as there are in the database, and we're gonna fill those fields with a false. So if we have 4 items in my data, we should have 4 falses, right? And if we have 2, we have 2 falses inside the array. Okay, So if we want to look at what that looks like, we're gonna go ahead and create a console log here. Losing my voice. And I'm gonna put that in there. And now if you look at the console log right here, you can see what we just created. We created these 14 of them right here are from here, and these 4 are from here, and then these 2 are down here. So we created these new arrays for as long as the database is, as long as the data that you object, and then we're creating or replacing each of the objects with a false. Okay, makes sense. Now for this date, what we want to do now is we want to make sure that we iterate the position for each one of those checkboxes, so that way my checkbox will not just be the entire check state, but it will be each checkbox will have that index that I found in here into this one. So technically this right here is the same thing as saying first, second one, or third one, or fourth one, like that. So now if you notice, I can still now create, you see all these trues and false down here, true, true, false, false, true, false. It's because doing true, true, false, false, true, false is doing that. It's creating. So if I come down here to this bottom right here, it's going to, out of these 2, true, false, see? And if I go like that, it's going to say true, true. It's console logging it twice, but that may have to be because of other reasons. Just re-rendering, basically. It's just re-rendering twice. So don't worry about this many re-renders right here. That's basically because I'm not using use effect and all that other stuff. So all right, so now we know that we are able to control. We already satisfied one part of the problem, which is basically being able to create actual values, okay, actual values for each one of these checkboxes, and not just going by just because it looks like it's checked. Just because it looked like it was checked before, it doesn't mean that it was actually creating a checked value or a true value. The value is what you actually need in order to talk to a database, to an API. All right, so we got that done. So we're looking good. And now what we need to do is we need to make sure that when I click select all, that this thing selects all of my checkboxes at the same time, because I don't want my users to have to click all of these one at a time, right? That will be horrible. So first of all, I am going to get rid of this console log here so that I don't get this down here so many times. So save this, okay? Now for this to work, for this guy to work, just like all of these other ones down here, right? Just like all of these, they work because you're clicking on them, right? They don't work by brain control, right? So we want to make sure that when we click on it, it does something. So just like anything that we've done so far, you're gonna need a click event. So we're gonna go to the form label right here because we're pretty much done here. We're gonna go to the click event here, and then now the label, which right now it just says label. We're gonna name it something else. Okay, so all right, just making sure that I have. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually name this. You see what the name label is? We want that label to be the name of the database itself, right? Like that, genre, content type, program type, blah, 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 all that stuff. So what we're going to do is we're gonna come over here, whatever, right here on the label, and we're gonna actually turn that into a prop. And then obviously we gotta pass it just like we did with the data. So we have to pass it now. And then now we can come over here to the app, and then we can say label, and now, oops, sorry. And now this one is gonna be genre. And then this one is gonna be content type. And then this one is going to be program type. All right, so as you can see, this is making each one of those, groups right here even more customizable, which is the beautiful thing about being able to do reusable components this way. All right. So that part is done. We can come back over here because this is done, and we can basically minimize this stuff here. And then now we need to work on this switch right here. So right now this switch, it does absolutely nothing but just shows us a switch, and the switch basically just turns and colors and all that because it's material UI stuff. It's just UI stuff. It's not really doing anything. We actually need to create two things, right? We did this over here already. What did we do? We created a checked property and an unchanged event. Okay, so this is no different. We need to create a checked property, which right now, if I put checked, it basically checks them all, right? And then we need to have an unchanged event, just like we did earlier. And then the unchanged event is going to be named, what I name mine, handle switch. We're gonna call it handle switch. And there it is. Now it's throwing off an error because handle switch doesn't exist, right? What is it? Come on, show it to me. Handle, okay, right there. You see what it says? Handle switch is not defined. All right, so we gotta create that. So let's come over here underneath this stuff right here, and we're gonna const handle switch and make it a function, just like we did before. All right. So now that we have our handle switch, we could give it a return, but nah, we're not. We're just gonna leave it like that. All right. So now this right here is going to set up the active and inactive, or true and false, right, state for these checkboxes right here. So we gotta make sure that we update that we control that with a state, just like we did with the other checkbox. So we're gonna have an array, and we're gonna call this one active, and then set active as the setter, and then that's gonna be equal to use state, and then we're gonna make it false initially. All right, so now that we did that, now what we can do here is we can make it so that just to make sure that we know that it's working, we're gonna set the active to true, right? We're gonna change this active from false to true, and then we're gonna come over here to, let me close this, to the checked here, and we're gonna give the value of the whatever it's called, state, the state to it. Okay, so now if I click on it, it's true. If I click on it again, it's not making it false, because all we're doing is basically just switching it to true. If I do the reverse of it, then it will work, it will toggle itself on and off, and you notice it's independent to each one of them. Okay, so that's good. That means that we're able to control the state for each one of the toggles, but it's not really doing what we want, right? What do we want it to do? We wanted that when we click it, we want to make sure that all of these get on, and then when we click it again, all of these turn off. So we have to do that. All right, that's first of all what we're trying to figure out. Well, there's a couple of things that we need to know. First, we need to find out the event for this right here. We need to find out when it's actually true and when it's not true, when it's checked and when it's not checked. So for that, we're gonna capture the event right here. We can call it E, or you can call it event, you can call it whatever you want, okay? And then in here, well, first of all, let's first find out what's inside the event. So we're gonna do a console log, and then, no, console log, there you go. And then in the console log, we're going to print the event target checked, okay, and see what's inside the event, and you will be able to see it down here. So if I click on it, it's false. If I click it like that, it's true. So it's telling me which event So right here, whenever, by knowing the target event, I know that right now it's true. So whenever it's here, I'm basically gonna tell the code, hey, if the eTarget event checked is true, do something. If it's false, do something. So you see, that's the whole thing about programming. In programming, you kind of need to have a hook and sinker. Okay, you need to have something to hook onto to change all the properties and change all the things depending on the state of that thing that you can latch onto. Okay, that's how you create a communication between you and the computer and the code. All right, so now that we do that, just like I said, right? What did I say we needed to do? If the event is true, do this, else do that. That's basically what we got to do here, right? What is it that we're trying to do? If the event is checked, set this active to true, else set it to false. So now if I save it again, it's still true, it's still false. If we look at the state, this state right here that I'm trying to manipulate, okay, I think it has to be done after it fires. So if I click it on, I got true and true. Well, let's do it together. Because it's doing one and it's running this one, then running this one, then running this one, then running this one. So you're looking at it weird. Let's do it this way here. Okay, so it's twice fall and then true and then twice true and then false. It's kind of weird, but let's just so we can actually check it better. Then you can see that it's false and then true and then true and then false. So it's really confusing because of the way that this thing is doing a re-render. I think that's part of what Code Sandbox is doing. But the bottom line is, so let's just do it over here, right? So I set the active to true. I'm gonna say I'm active, I'm true. There you go. And if it's false, it's gonna say I'm not. So this right here says I'm true, and if I set it off, it says I'm not. Does that make more sense now? All right. So we basically know that we are able to access the active, okay, the active state. All right. So now that we do that, what we actually want to do is that when we select this, we want all of these guys to come on, right? So remember what we did here, how we painted a new array and we set them all up for as long as the data is, right, for at the length, for the entire length, for as many items as it has in the data, repaint each one of those items in it with false. Well, that's how you uncheck them all to begin with, right? And that's how you check them, and you check them all true in the same fashion. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this right here, set check state, and what is it that we're trying to do? So if it's true, set all of these guys right here and paint them with a new array of true. But if it's not, if it's false, then set the checks, hold on, let me type and then talk. All right, so by doing this, what we're doing is every time we click on this guy right here, read the event, right, the checked event, and if the checked event is true, if the checked event is true, then set the active state for my own toggle to be true. In other words, make it blue, sorry. but also set the checked state, which is all of these guys. Set this check state and transform them all into true so that they're all on. And if it's false, if I click false, then it will do it. But it will do it on this handle switch. It will do it on that click. So you notice it hasn't changed yet. The reason why it hasn't changed yet is because I haven't clicked on it. This runs by a click event. So now if I click it, these are all off. And if I click it on, all of these are on. So this is true. The checked event is true. Right? We can come over here and do a console log again for the target, and let's just do it right there. There you go. So you see the checkbox event right here. So if the checked event is true, well, right now it's really not checking. Well, it's always going to be checked. Okay. Okay, so if I wonder if I even no, it does need the check event. Yeah. So if there is a check event, set the active to true. If not, then set the active to false, and it's basically toggling this. It's doing a toggle, and then checking also this. There is a better way to do this with a ternary function, but for right now, this is doing the job, and it's doing it for all of them. So I'm happy. I'm satisfied with this. And I'm still able to check all of them and then check all of these individually. So that's good. So now we only have one more problem left that we need to figure out, and it's basically what happens if I come over here and I check them all individually. This should be select all, right? It should be selected all by completely. So I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of that console log. Now, this right here is going to be in the handle on change. It's going to happen. We got to modify that inside the single checkbox. Okay, so in order for that to happen, we got to make an adjustment to the handle on change here. All right. So what are we going to do to the handle on change? So think about it. If this right here, if this population, if this updated state, if this updated state, right, which is basically this, what we're doing is, if it contains a true or it contains a false, then do a separate thing for each one of them. That means if it contains a false, if they're all true, then they're all true. But if it at least contains one false, then it's not true. Does that make sense? We're trying to figure out whether all of these guys right here need to be all selected, right? So which one is the all selective, is the active right here, right? The set active. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to write it down so you can see what I mean. We're going to create a condition basically, and we're going to check for this selected updated check state. So we're going to read the updated check state, and we're going to say if it includes, if the updated check state includes a false, if there's anything in there that is false, then set the active, which is this guy right here, right? This is how we control this toggle, by the active state. Set the active to false. However, or else, if it doesn't include a false, right, that means they're all true. Then if they're all true, then obviously this set active needs to also be true. So we're gonna deselect all of them, and then once I select all of them, it does that. I can select all of them, and then if I deselect one of them, it also does that. If I select it again, it selects all of them again. So this works just as I want it to work. And there you go. All right, so that is pretty much all there is to it. The only one thing that I wanted to explain was this right here. What if your database or your API or whatever is not like this, with a string of this guy's right here? Well, If that's the case, let's just bring up one more guy down here. Program type 2. I'm gonna call that one program type 2. But this one uses program type that name. Program type 2, sorry, that name. I probably should call it something else. Now there may be some issues with the way that it's also programmed, yeah, for the data length. Yeah, there's problem here because now the data, it needs to call for the data that name length. So it's going to break because of that issue. All right, so there will be some stuff that you're gonna have to modify if that's if this is the way your database works. Your program, your database has to be destructured a little bit further, and at the same time also the way that you're talking to the data also has to be destructured a little bit further. I'm not gonna do it here because either way it's gonna break unless I get rid of these right here, right? If I have to refactor it to this format, and I refactor it over here as well to that format, then I can use it on these right here. So you basically have to make sure that all of your database are completely formatted, that all your data is either formatted this way by objects or formatted this way by strings. If you happen to have a database that contains two different kinds, then you're gonna have to do this a little bit different by creating maybe two different filters, one for strings and one for objects, okay? And then that way you can still use both, all right? But if not, then basically this will work just fine if I just get rid of it and everything works, all right? And then I don't really need this anymore, I suppose. That way I can get rid of that problem in there and it's safe. All right, well, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about. I hope that whoever was asking me this stuff, I hope that this helps you, okay? And if you wanna go ahead and click and subscribe, whatever you wanna do, that's up to you. If not, hey, thanks, and don't forget to ask me in the comments anything else you wanna know. I'll eventually make some time and explain it. All right, see you later, guys.